Welcome back to another Mackem in the Middle podcast as we return following a hectic festive weekend is how I would describe it. But let me be the last here to wish you all a Merry Christmas as we are through that season now, for now, as we head into the new year. But joining me today is a man who may not be able to walk on water, but he shares the same initials as the guy who did, and it's James Copley. So James, how are you and how was your Christmas?
Very good, thank you. It's the first time I've been compared to Jesus Christ. So yeah, I think the only way is down from here.
I figured, the last podcast I was on, I had the two Dans after, of course, the two Dans for us, scored, goals. So I figured who would be the best person following Christmas, and the initials lined up. And I won't discuss how long I've been workshopping, some sort of good opening line, but here we are nonetheless. But it's been quite a week or so for the club, as it always tends to be. And following the mutual parting ways of Tony Mowbray, Michael Beale steps in as the new manager for SAFC, and to a rather, I would say, mixed reception. Is that how you'd categorize that as well?
Yes, I would definitely say so. I think we ran a poll on the Sunderland Echoes Twitter page, and I think the options were: are you happy, unhappy, or waiting to give him a chance? And I think only 4% said they were happy. Obviously, that's only a snapshot. I think it was 1,500 votes, but I think ALS and Wiseman say maybe ran similar polls, slightly worded different. But I think underwhelmed was the view of a lot of Sunderland fans. But I think in that same poll, a lot of Sunderland fans said they were willing to give him a chance as well, which I think you're always going to get a fair shake at Sunderland, despite the social media noise, by the majority of fans anyway.
Right. And I would say, while everyone says, you can't judge a fan base by its Twitter, for me, that's all I really know is Sunderland Twitter makes up, just about much of the fan base. And I do find that the polls can be, pretty interesting, especially just depending on what types of answers are given. And, while sometimes I disagree how binary, it's either yes or no, that really is kind of what gets the best kind of reaction. So I get it from there, but I always like room for a little nuance, just about as much as Michael Bowers loves a clean sheet. So, and which we'll get to later. So, but nonetheless, it was quite the abysmal home debut for Michael Beale, and we won't spend too much time on it because there wasn't much really to discuss, but losing 3-0 to Coventry at home, quite not the ideal start, I would say, but the nice thing about this time of year, I feel, is that the games come thick and fast, as they like to say. And so the lads now went on to face Hull City, which was yesterday, Boxing Day, which was actually just a fantastic Boxing Day all around. The games across all across the country were fantastic, but nonetheless went on the road to face Hull City, a team that were surprisingly in the top half, really strong team, a team that we're going to be facing kind of for those last few spots. But what was your, I guess, kind of, the vibe, I guess, heading into this Hull City game? What were you kind of reading into it, and what were you expecting to see in Michael Beale's kind of second crack at it?
I'm not sure. I think, coming into it, expectations on my sort of behalf are pretty low. I think that's just natural after the Coventry City drubbing, losing 3-0 at home. It was a real poor display in the second half. Sunderland and Coventry City don't like each other as well, so it's not particularly nice to lose to Coventry City. The atmosphere in the stadium of bordered on toxic at times. There's been the Newcastle United ticket fiasco. There was a few banners against that decision. There was Tony Mowbray chants. There was sort of sarcastic jeers when certain players left the pitch. Sarcastic jeers when Michael Beale made substitutions. They were booed off at halftime, booed off at full time. So in the context of that, I wasn't expecting a great deal, because when things go belly up at Sunderland, they tend to go belly up in a big way. So I was fully expecting Sunderland to lose, to be honest. But I think credit to Michael Beale and the players for the reaction. I think that performance suggests that Michael Beale has the players, which was a question after replacing such a popular figure in Tony Mowbray. And I've spoken about this on the Echoes podcast, The Raw. We did a special with Graham Falk from What the Falk. We did like a joint cross promotion thing. But in terms of a Sunderland performance, in terms of the ideals and the culture and what fans expect of a Sunderland performance, I think against Hull, that's the minimum. That's all we really want. Really, is sort of dogged grit, determination, running. I think they hit all of those markers quite well. It was a strong performance in terms of, general effort. They rode the luck at times. Yes, I think Hull probably should have taken the lead. Connolly had a really good chance, although there was a couple of Sunderland players back on the line. But then you could argue that Sunderland had a good chance as well in the second half with Roberts. And then, that man Jack Clark is very good at football. So he managed to do what he does, which is what he's in the side to do, which is great. No surprise to me that he's gone and done that. A real moment of individual skill, probably one of the easiest assists Dan Neil's ever going to make. Just sort of gave him the ball on the left and just let him run. And then before you know it, the ball's in the back of the net. It wasn't a perfect performance by any means, but it was a good away performance, absolutely, and a very good result. As you mentioned, Hull a bit of a surprise package this season in the Championship, playoff contenders under Liam Rossini, playing good football. They've got some good players, although their main guy, Philogene, was out. He's sort of like their Jack Clark type winger. They do have some quality in Connolly and Liam Delap as well, who I actually thought was very bright and forced a good save from Anthony Patterson directly after Roberts' chance in the second half. If that goes in, it could be a very different story. So yeah, lots to dissect, but I think the main takeaway for me was that Michael Beale really, really, really needed that, and I think he knew he needed it as well. Yep. And he didn't go too berserk on the touchline. He didn't celebrate too hard. I think it was the overriding feeling was a sense of relief, I think.
I would say so. And I was thinking back to that Coventry match, and truly, I do almost think that's, I wouldn't say the best case scenario, because obviously you'd like to go in there and win, but it is one of those games where you'd rather just kind of get it out of the way early, or really just, you want to know what you're in for. I think Michael Beale knew probably within the first 30 to 45 minutes, pretty much what he was going to be in for. And sometimes, let's make no illusions about it, that's just going to how it's going to be. And you can't have the highs without the lows, truly. So I almost think, while, not ideal, it's one of those where, hey, let's just get it out of the way early. Get it out of the way early. We know what the expectations are of the fans, and I'm sure Michael Beale did. I'm really, minimalizing that there, but I kind of look back on it as just it was kind of somewhat of a free hit in a way for a manager. Just go in there, let's not just let it go completely off the rails. And it did. And now we know that he can kind of regain the troops, pretty quickly. And I think a lot of that credit too goes to Mike Dodds as well, because I think he's been, with all the constant change in this club, he's been the one constant thing that stayed the same. And so I think that's been a huge benefit for Michael Beale to come in and set up for this match as well. So it's, like I said, I think the biggest benefit was that this game came quickly, which was good. But you did a fantastic job kind of hitting on the highlights there. Truly, heading into this match and seeing the starting lineup, we knew there was going to be at least one change in that. Niall Huggins was injured last match, which I'm absolutely devastated. I don't dislike anyone on the team. There's just varying levels of how much I like people. And I have just absolutely loved Niall Huggins since he's come in. How would you rate that impact on the loss, the loss of Niall Huggins? And, what was kind of your immediate reaction when he did go off the field in the last match?
No, same as you. Absolutely gutted for the lad. He's really nice from the sort of couple of minutes I've spent in his presence. He spoke after that game against Mallorca in pre-season, when he was sort of edging his way back, and obviously he's had a lot of injury issues. He came up through the academy at Leeds, then he joined Sunderland, and he hardly played a game. I think he played 2 or 3 games for us in League One, something like that. So having him back's been a welcome boost, and it's been one of the stories of the season for me, sort of observing how good he's been. And you must be good to force Trey Hume into switching to the other side, because Trey Hume had that right back spot sort of nailed down, and rightly so. But thankfully Trey Hume can play on the left, and so can Huggins. But Huggins has come into the right back spot and really nailed it down. But I think it's so harsh on him, given his effort and application this season, and all signs are pointing towards it being a pretty serious one. You see the screen grabs of what happened to his leg, and it could be one of a number of things. It could be ankle, could be ligaments, could be knee. It could have damaged his hip. I think Sunderland is still waiting to find out the extent of the injury, but it is a big blow. It really is, and Sunderland seem to get really unlucky with these injuries. I think the one saving grace is that you've got a couple of players coming back. Obviously, Timothy Pembele, who signed from PSG in the summer. He played for Sunderland's under-21s for the first time. He's yet to feature at all for Sunderland's first team. He was on the bench against Hull, so he's sort of coming back. He can play right-hand side of defence as well. Aji Alisi is on the comeback trail. He could play left back and centre back, so that frees Hume up maybe to go right back. Dennis Sergen perhaps won't be too much longer. We haven't had an update on him for a while, but hopefully he's coming back as well. So there are those three players coming back in, but Niall Huggins has been so good this season, and it is such a shame. I think it's always a shame to see a player go down with such a serious injury and be stretched off the field as well. You never want to see that, but I think it hurts double given the serious injuries he's already had to endure in what is a pretty young career as well. So we obviously wish him well, and hopefully it isn't too bad and the photos just looked worse than they were.
which can be the case. Yeah, sometimes you see those types of things, and yeah, I think I've seen it with ankle or sometimes knee injuries where you're like, God, I hope it's just a mild break, if anything, rather than the ligament damage. But nonetheless, we'll wait and see. Obviously, to once the club comes out and goes with that. But nonetheless, we actually do have a little bit of depth in that position this season, at least knock on wood, because in steps Jensen Silt, who we've seen make a few cameos so far this season. Since coming in, we signed him from in the offseason. I know he's from the Netherlands originally. I believe he was from PSV before this, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, which PSV has a fantastic track record just across the board for developing young talent. And if we can set up some sort of pipeline there, I think that would be fantastic. But in steps Jensen Steele. And then one other change as well was Bradley Dack coming in for Abdullah Ba, who I've had my frustrations with, really with Abdullah Ba mainly, in these last few seasons, or last few games that he's debuted, and maybe a little bit harshly. But in steps Bradley Dack, and James, how would you kind of rate the reception for Bradley Dack to come in? Because I thought there would be a lot more, I don't know if fume's the right word, but I think Dack has been on the receiving end of quite a lot of criticism this season. So how do you rank the decision to start Dack in this one from Michael Beale in what we kind of considered to be a must win?
It's not what I would have done personally, but I think up until his injury, Bradley Dack was having a fairly decent game. Obviously, Sunderland hadn't been massively effective in that first half going forward, but Bradley Dack had a sort of half chance on the volley in the box, which was really tough. Actually, he ended up sort of volleying it over the bar, but you don't really expect him to score them because it was such a tough chance. But yeah, it's a shame that he was brought off injured. He was obviously down for a little bit as well, so we're still waiting to hear about that particular injury. So another slice of bad luck for Sunderland. But I think the main thing to take away is that. And this is a point that's been made elsewhere far and wide as well, as that, Tony Mowbray, Mike Dodds, and now Michael Beale aren't starting any of the strikers Sunderland have at the club. And when Dack was taken off, it was Aushoush that came on. It wasn't Mayenda, Rusin or Burstow. So it's telling in that sense, I think. What Sunderland would give to have an informed striker that could score goals and where they would be in the table if they had one. Tony Mowbray might still be at the club. You don't know. It's all ifs, buts, and maybes. But yes, Dack has come in for a little bit of stick, possibly a little bit unfairly. I think some of that might relate to his image, and obviously he's got his wife who's the ex Love Island and all that sort of stuff, and the Daily Mail love posting stories about them, and they're all over the showbiz news, and that's not necessarily Bradley Dack's fault. And man goes to a restaurant with his wife on Christmas Eve, and it's all over the tabloids and all of that sort of stuff. It hasn't really worked for him at Sunderland yet. Obviously scored against Southampton, but hasn't really done too much. Hasn't really had the opportunity to get a run of games under his belt. There's probably a player there, but whether it works out here, I'm not too sure.
Yep. And what I found interesting is that how we are addressing this lack of striker, quote unquote, situation. And really it's been, or at least from what I can tell, it's just kind of intermixing Job and then whoever that other player is. So if it's Job and Ba or Job and Dak in this situation, seeing them alternate making those runs. And I've been screaming out, and I absolutely love Joe Bellingham, and shout out to his brother Jude, who's in attendance as well. There's just been some great reactions. Talk about a man who, when he comes back to this country, the camera does not stop following him. Is Jude Bellingham, for obviously good reasons. But he even came out and commented that Joe Bellingham is kind of the thoroughbred striker in the family, right? So I've been kind of crying out, saying like, just put him up top, and I don't know if it's a situation where he wants to be in that kind of preferred attacking midfield role or whatever. Regardless where he is, he tends to perform pretty well. I've been seeing that a lot though, with him going up and kind of making those. For me, he's just one of the only players, Joe, currently who has his shooting boots on. The ones he's willing to take shots from outside, and we saw it a little bit yesterday. And anyways, did a fantastic job, I would say, really throughout most of the first half. But speaking of the first half, there wasn't really a lot, and I was just watching through the highlights as well. Wasn't a lot from us, truly. The majority of it, I would say, was more the frustration of the same of Jack Clark getting the ball on the wing, or Patrick Roberts, which we'll get to in a little bit. But Jack Clark getting the ball on the wing, kind of in that dangerous spot that he absolutely loves. And the thing I've noticed is anytime he's in or around that 18-yard box, there's usually about 4 players in each of those, what Lee Johnson would call the POMO positions, right? It's right where he would cut back and try to make these shots, and kept getting deflections, or he kept pulling it back. And then Patrick Roberts on the other side, James, I would say an understatement of the year would be that he's having a rough go to this season. But what are you seeing from Patrick Roberts, and do you still feel like he's providing enough to justify starting in these games, or do you feel like an evaluation there for possible change needs to be kind of looked at?
For me, I think Patrick Roberts should still start games for Sunderland. I know he hasn't registered a goal or an assist yet, but I don't think that's for lack of trying. I think some of the balls that he laid on against Hull, if you had somebody like a Ross Stewart or a Nathan Broadhead just attacking the front post, if you had somebody with those instincts that strikers, poachers, nous, I think Sunderland would have scored another couple of goals, to be honest. Sometimes he's getting the ball, he's beating 2 or 3 men, getting to the byline, cutting it back, and unfortunately there's nobody there. I do think he should have scored against Hull. He probably would admit that was a fairly decent save from their goalkeeper. But for me, he starts every week. He's that good, especially carrying the ball up the field. I think he's marvellous. But, I think Aushish came on for Dak, and he did go over to the right wing when Pritchard came on and Roberts went off. So that was interesting. For me, Aushish is more of an attacking midfielder in the centre, but he did do okay on the right wing and arguably changed the game for Sunderland a little bit. So that's interesting. That's one to watch. But for me, Patrick Roberts, he starts every week. Not that I'm saying he's untouchable or undroppable, but I think the goals and assists will come. And I do think, he's gone from playing with Ahmad next to him, which was an electric partnership, and now he hasn't got Ahmad next to him, and he hasn't got a striker to hit in the box either. So it's been tough going for him, but I do think he'll come good eventually. He's got too much quality not to, and I think it's very positive actually that he signed a new contract at Sunderland.
I agree. Yep, absolutely. And going to the Hull City side, the one thing I noticed in that first half, and you mentioned him a bit earlier, was the Liam Delap. I mean, my goodness, he just looks massive. and he's just got really good pace and really physical on the ball, and I thought that he really provided good challenges for our back line, which in the end Hume once again held his own, I would say, throughout most of that first half. But just looking at Liam Delap, of course he's on loan from Man City. I figured that, I was like, man, where are Hull finding these players? But I think they're doing a really good job in the loan market with the likes of Delap. And then Scott Twine, I find a really interesting one. He was compared a lot last season to Jack Clark in a lot of ways, because Scott Twine, along with the lad from Bristol City, I can't remember.
Alex Scott.
Yep. Yeah. They were the two kind of the marquee, I would say, championship signings from last season. And, Twine went for pretty big money to Burnley, and then now back on loan to to Hull, but I mean, he really didn't have a sniff last game, unless I'm misremembering. But how did you feel like the defense held up with both Delap and Twine making some pretty good runs?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of both players actually, and I think Delap's he struggled on loan at Stoke. He only got 3 goals in 22, I think, and then he went on loan to Preston North End. He only got 1 in 15, but he's got 6 already this season. So it suggests that he's sort of growing. He's only 20 years old. He's got massive pedigree in the game. Obviously, Manchester City rate him highly. He's played for England at just about every age group level. So there's clearly a player there. I was surprised to see him sort of on the right wing and coming up against Hume, and I thought he gave Hume a lot of problems. Actually, as I mentioned earlier, he probably should have scored. Patterson made a good save, and I thought in behind he was excellent. You know, sort of striker playing on the wing. It was interesting to see. It was interesting to see that. And yeah, he did cause Sunderland some problems. Scott Twine's another player that I really like. Obviously, he was MK Dons, wasn't he? And then obviously Burnley bought him, as you mentioned, for big money. But I think, you know, shout out to Sunderland's defence. There was a couple of times where Hull City really broke. I think the problem is at Sunderland, or with Sunderland at the moment, in the first half, they were happy to sit off Hull. I think that was a deliberate ploy because they didn't want to press and they didn't want to get picked off in midfield and give Hull space in behind, which was fair enough. In the second half, the game became a little bit more open. Sunderland wanted to score, as did Hull City. But to compensate for the lack of striker, you have the likes of Neil and Ekwa and Job getting forward quite a bit, and then the fullbacks pushing on. It leaves you open to the counter-attack. And on a couple of occasions, Hull did counter-attack. There's some Dan Ballard sprints in there, which are brilliant for a big man to get all the way back. Mm-hmm. is absolutely sensational, especially from corners. There was a moment later on in the game as well, where Hull get to the byline and cross it in, and it looks really dangerous. And Luke O'Nien is in the right place, in the right time, shows great defensive instincts. Sort of half stands on the ball. It's not the most convincing of clearances, but the most important thing is that he gets it away to Ekwa, who then gets it higher on up the pitch. And let's not forget that Luke O'Nien made a mistake against Coventry for the first goal. He wasn't entirely at fault. There was a long way to go after that, but you could argue that, you know, in the first instance, it was his responsibility. That, as it always does with Luke O'Nien, sparks a massive debate and a lot of criticism. He always seems to bounce back. He did well, kept a clean sheet. That's probably why he's in the side, and he did show some great defensive instincts towards the end to deny Hull. So I feel like we go around in circles with O'Nien. Everybody criticises him, and you know, I think there's a certain section that will just never really like him and want him to fail. Really, I think you have to call a spade and admit that up until the Coventry City first goal, he was actually having a pretty good game. It was a stupid thing to do, which he is prone to. There's no denying that. But against Hull City, he was very good, and that's what he can be. So I think it's about being balanced, isn't it? But yeah, a very strong defensive display from Sunderland. You know, we should mention Jensen Seelt as well. I know you mentioned him earlier on the podcast, but I think that was only his 4th game for Sunderland. I think his only other start came against Birmingham City at home, alongside Triantis, when there was a late injury to Serkin, and O'Nien and Ballard were suspended for the same game out of memory. So he's done well to come in and play it right back. I thought he looked quite assured on the ball, defensively quite solid. So, you know,
he went forward well a lot as well.
Yeah,
which is, you know, one thing I noticed, it was, you know, it would be Patrick Roberts with the ball, and then it would just be this, you know, big Jensen Seelt running up next to him, which I love to see, and really it got a fantastic touch too. The thing I've noticed in the last few games, and you know, probably has been all season, we're never really caught in the back very much. You know, we're typically able to play the ball out extremely well. I think it's this new the modern football era of you know, kind of the ball playing, defensive, you know, basically your back defensive line, and going all the way back to Patterson, who I think has a little bit of help to do. But I think Seelt has a fantastic ball, and especially on set pieces, he gives us that height, whereas Huggins was making the kind of the cutting runs, who was really fantastic at kind of weaving through a defense. I love what I see from Seelt. So it's a bit like the difference between Dennis Serkin and Adji Elise. Obviously they were competing for a left back spot, but they're both sort of
it's sort of like a similar pairing, isn't it? Really, on either side of Sunderland's defence. One's a bit bigger, can do a different thing to the smaller player. But I think it's a huge positive that we can probably now trust Jensen still in championship matches. He's not the finished article, but I think it's good because out of these players that were brought in the summer, apart from Job, none of them have really played too much. So I think to get minutes under the belts of some of these players is good. And Triantis came on towards the end for Clark to see the game out, and his one contribution was to fold a City player in half and give away a really dangerous free kick, which Hull didn't capitalise on in the end, thank God. So you could argue that Triantis won Sunderland the game in the end, but yeah, that's a questionable proposition. But yeah, definitely good to get these lads some more experience.
Yep, and just touch on Luke 09. I have literally all the time in the world for him. I 100% understand his shortcomings in certain areas, but there's just something about seeing a player who really, I wouldn't say was pegged for this level much at all, I think, for most of his career, but to be able to come in and really, for the most part, just perform extremely well. And just, I just go back, I met him when they did the U.S. tour here. I met a lot of the players in the airport, actually, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, of all places. And, took some pictures with, a few of the other guys. They were fine. But he was the only one who just stopped and just like genuinely asked, like, for one, like, how I was doing and like how I became a fan and all that. And it seriously is one of the highlights of my life, as just sad as that sounds. The birth of my child, maybe just edging that out, slightly. But no, it genuinely was just amazing. So I love Luke 09, but I understand his shortcomings. But nonetheless, back to the game. Right before the end of the first half, Bradley Dack does go down with what seemed like a kind of non-contact injury to an extent. Kind of went for a challenge on the ball and just came up, but you could tell he was very upset about it. Didn't look. It's hard to tell. Nonetheless, Bradley Dack goes off right before the end of the first half, and on comes Adil Al-Shish to really see out the first half and move forward from there. I think the decision to bring in Adil made sense. I would say maybe Pritchard, who we'll get to toward the end as well, would have been maybe my first inkling, but I've really liked Al-Shish so far from what I've seen, and I think him coming on kind of at that half, for me, at least starting the second half, was the catalyst to get things going, because the second half, I think overall from even a neutral perspective, was fantastic. But how do you think Adil Al-Shish, slotted in, and what did you make of his performance as he came on for the second 45 minutes?
Yeah, I think he did well. He's a player I want to see more of, to be honest. He has started a few games for Sunderland, but he sort of dipped in and out of the team. He signed a 5-year contract at Sunderland, so they clearly rate him highly and think he's going to develop. And I can see what they see in him. I think he's hugely exciting, and yeah, as I say, it'd be great if he could start more games and start having more of a contribution. As I said earlier, I'm not sure right wing's his position, but if he can do a job out there, that's fine. I think for me, it's good that Sunderland do have some depth in those attacking positions, but the midfield of Ekwa, Bellingham, and Dan Neil, I think they've put in a lot of shifts recently, and I do think they're getting tired. I did say on social media that the three of them are probably knackered and of need of a rest, and I think people mistook that for me saying that they had bad games. They didn't. The three of them had really good games, but I just think they're getting a little bit jaded. So it'll be interesting to see in January whether Sunderland brings somebody in. Obviously, got Jay Matete coming back and Corey Evans hopefully at some point. But yeah, I think Sunderland needs some experience and rotation in those positions. Could Al-Shish come a bit further back? I don't think so. I think he's more of a 10. But yeah, good to see him having an impact.
Yeah, second half, like I said, was a really enjoyable watch from both sides. Very open. And what you said about, these, I feel like a lot with these players, especially in the situation we have where we don't have a striker, you see a lot of players not necessarily drift out of position. I'm sure they're given the license now, and I'm sure Michael Beale will kind of understand their best kind of positions moving forward. But I saw a lot of movement, a lot of drifting in and out. Joe Bellingham put in a hell of a shift, and I think probably a lot of it was, his big brother's there watching. Obviously, he was absolutely gassed by the end of it. So I was just, maybe I was calling a little bit for a sub, but I get maybe why the sub wasn't made. But nonetheless, the game remained open. Some very close chances on both sides. The one for us that really sticks out is the ball played through to Patrick Roberts. I think, was it Jack Clark who played the ball through as well?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, beautiful slotted ball through the middle. Took one touch and really it was a nice play by a keeper. But you would think an informed Patrick Roberts would probably be making that conversion, converting that goal. Nonetheless, it didn't come off for him. So we continue on, and it really wasn't until the 80? No, excuse me. The goal. Now I'm getting my timelines all mixed up. But the goal from Jack Clark came, was it the 82nd minute? And like you said, probably the easiest assist that Dan Neal will ever be credited for. But plays Jack down the left-hand wing, as we've seen a million times. He cuts in to his right foot, as we've seen a million times, and he slots it in the back of the goal. James, what do you think was different for this goal? Because obviously we've tried that really, so many times throughout the season. It just hasn't quite been coming off. But what did you see that was different this time with Jack Clark in that ball and able to score this goal, on how Hull defended it, or was it all Jack Clark from there?
I think you have to credit Jack Clark. It's a brilliant run and a brilliant finish. He does try to do that quite a lot, but I think the difference against Hull is space. I think he had plenty of space on the ball. I think Christie, the fullback, I think he was called Christie. He sits off just a little bit too long, and you give him that space where Jack Clark can manipulate the ball from his left foot to his right foot, curl it. You could argue that perhaps the keeper, if he's set properly, should save it, possibly not expecting the ball to come too soon. Or as soon as it does, but it's a really good finish, and I thought the celebration was brilliant as well. I think if you're a neutral looking at that celebration with Jack Clark cupping his ears to the fans, you could be forgiven for thinking that he was taking the Michael or that he was trying to prove a point, but he wasn't. He wasn't sort of saying, he wasn't having a go at the fans. It was, let me hear you, I want to hear you sort of raw. He was trying to G everybody up. It was marvellous to see actually that connection between Clark and Sunderland fans, but great goal, and it's that sort of Iron Robin thing, isn't it? Like, you know what he's going to do, but it's actually really hard to stop. Right. I think nine of his 11 or 12 goals have come away from home this season, and where Sunderland would be without him, I'm not quite sure. It's interesting actually that he doesn't really have too many assists this season, which is probably telling as well that him and Roberts, who chipped in with a fair few assists last season, haven't got too many this season. And for me, it suggests that there isn't a Ross Stewart and Ellis Sims or even an Amad Diallo to tee up in the box, which is where Sunderland's fundamental problems lie. Not to bang the broken record again or bang the drum again.
Yeah, and like I said, the one thing I noticed too when I saw him get that ball and as he's approaching the box, the kind of defensive midfielders for Hull were pretty gassed, I think, at that point, and they were definitely late getting into the box. And when I saw him, I saw just the one defender in front of him, no one in that kind of what I would consider like the upper right quadrant of that box, and that's where Jack Clark likes to cut it in. Usually, I saw no one there, and I said goal probably 2 or 3 seconds before the goal actually happened, just because it was finally the one time that there wasn't 9 defenders in the box, and that's credit to Sunderland, I think, to just not deviate. I think we know what works for us, and I think in a situation, especially on the road, you got to go back to your bread and butter, so to speak. And this was finally the one where we caught them lacking a little bit, and you could see the defenders too. They were screaming at each other in Hull, basically mentioning that like that's where you were supposed to be. That's why he scored, because there's finally nobody there. And I love to see the celebration. You saw Jude Bellingham, of course, go nuts in the fans. You just love to see it, and it's absolutely what makes this league, I think, really fun to watch. I've had so much enjoyment watching this, and it hasn't been easy, and we're not always expected to win, but to pull one out like that in front of the traveling away fans, Michael Beale's second game. I mean, you could just kind of feel that collective gasp. And then toward the end, as we saw it, because we still had a good 10 to 15 minutes to see out. I didn't feel too nervous. I felt like the defense played pretty well. There was just a few kind of last minute subs. We had Alex Pritchard came on, right before that as well, who that's kind of been his cameo is the last 15 minutes. And speaking of all the time in the world, I love Alex Pritchard. I think he's been fantastic. And every minute that we have him to be able to contribute, I think is an absolute positive. So he came on again, and sure enough, he didn't involve directly in the goal, of course, but I think his influence plays a big part. But we see it out. Like you said, Triantis does come on. Nectar Triantis comes on and to seal the victory, so to speak, with just an absolute folding tackle, which you do love to see. Maybe use a little bit more discretion that time, but hey, when needs must, you got to make the play, and good for him for stepping up and taking that yellow card. He's now you can say that he did play in the game. He did make an impact. So huge win. I think that goes understated, especially with another match coming quickly, just moving on to this Friday, going to face Rotherham, who are currently, I think, still bottom of the league. So probably the best fixture you could ask for if you're Michael Beale, coming off an impressive home win. But overall, how would you summarize this win, and then what would you look forward to this Friday's match against Rotherham?
No, absolutely brilliant to get the win, and huge for Michael Beale. In terms of Rotherham, they did beat Middlesbrough yesterday as well, so that is interesting. Obviously, Middlesbrough are a fairly good side, and Middlesbrough are still only 3 points off Sunderland. So for Rotherham to get a victory there, that was at home as well. Sunderland, of course, lost to Rotherham at their place last season, something which they are well aware of. I spoke to Trey Hume after the game, and he talked about that it's a hard place to go. I don't think it's going to be easy for Sunderland. Our record down there in recent seasons has been pretty rubbish, actually. We got hammered down there in League One. So I'm not expecting an easy game, to be honest. I think it's a potential banana skin. Sunderland have to take that game very seriously, because if you look at the table, you would assume Sunderland would win. Fans will be expecting to win, and rightly so, given the two budgets, the two positions, how each team's season's going. But Liam Richardson, ex-Wigan manager, is a guy I rate highly, actually, for the job he did at Wigan. He was probably sacked a bit unfairly amidst chaos at Wigan, having got them promoted to the Championship. Whether he can keep Rotherham up, I'm not really sure yet. But they're going to be scrapping for everything, and they're only, well, yeah. Actually, I'm just checking that they're quite a way off safety. Mm-hmm. But that Middlesbrough win is most welcome for them, because they'd lost the previous 4 games, so the form was awful. They're going to have their tails up, so to speak, a little bit of confidence restored. But then again, so will Sunderland. So it will be very, very interesting to see what happens. As you mentioned at the very beginning of the podcast, these games are coming thick and fast. So it's on Friday, late kickoff on Friday. So, quick turnaround, not a lot of time on the training ground. That's what the festive fixture list is all about. Then on to Preston North End on New Year's Day, a couple of days after, and then it's the big one against Newcastle. So no rest for the wicked, and certainly no rest if you're Michael Beale.
Yeah, January 6th, it has a different kind of, I would say, infamous, connotation here in the States compared to what happened a couple of years ago on January 6th. I'll let you Google it if you forgot. But I think this will be the second most chaotic January 6th of my lifetime. But excited for that. Obviously, Rotherham, like you said, is going to be a tough match, followed by Preston on January 1st. But just touched on Newcastle really quick. And, I've been trying to follow a little bit of the ticketing fiasco there. But what any updates on that? And have we gotten confirmation of any of because you see these swirling rumors, and you see, printed off that they're going to, take down all the Sunderland memorabilia and one of the lounge. I couldn't even follow, but any updates or any newsworthy notes to share from what's going to be just probably the most annoying, but most anticipated matchups in the Northeast for quite some time.
Yeah, we talked about this quite at length on the Road podcast. I have seen all of these rumours about covering things up in the Black Cats bar. I'm not really sure whether that's true or not. I think, for Sunderland fans, the annoyance comes that Newcastle fans are going to be in the Black Cats bar regardless, because the Black Cats bar is somewhere which houses home fans, and obviously away fans are going to be in there. It's a premium place for Sunderland fans as well. So it's not a great look that Newcastle have that section, nor that they are in the north stand lower, which means season ticket holders have to be displaced. I think what we do know is that it's a process of decision making which involves Sunderland, Newcastle, the FA, and then the safety authorities, which will include the police service, the ambulance, the fire service, all of that good stuff. And what we do know is that Sunderland fans weren't consulted in the process. Sunderland said that it was a quick turnaround, but the Red and White Army weren't consulted, so there was no dialogue, which seems a shame. What we do know is that away fans haven't been housed in the Black Cats bar ever before. I think I'm accurate in saying that. So why that is happening now, I'm not really sure. Me and Graham were talking about this, and I would hazard a guess and say that without having seen the minutes of the meetings, which are set to be released at some point, that it wouldn't be an FA or a safety board decision for Newcastle to get the Black Cats bar. It's either Newcastle have asked for it and Sunderland have said yes, or Sunderland have offered it. I don't know which. I would like to be proven wrong on that matter, and when the minutes of the meeting come out, perhaps I will be. But I don't see how that decision is made and why that decision is made. It's puzzling to me. The Newcastle Sunderland derbies are great. I've attended my fair share over the years, but you want them to be safe. And 6,000 Newcastle fans coming to the Stadium of Light and being housed in the home end. Mm-hmm. With a bubble trip as well, which means coaches have to be transported in and out of Sunderland, I think isn't good for either set of fans. It's not good for Newcastle fans. It's not good for Sunderland fans. And I think it adds to an already pretty volatile atmosphere. I've heard a lot of Sunderland fans saying that they're not going to go just because of what's happened and the increased allocation. They don't feel safe. They're not going to bring the kids. Some of them are just so appalled that they're going to be in the home end and they're going to be in the Black Cats bar that they're boycotting the fixture almost, which is completely understandable and I actually think quite sad because this should have been, the return of this brilliant fixture for the first time since 2016. And it's been tainted a little bit. Well, it's been tainted massively to the point where actually I don't think too many people are bothered about the result anymore. It's just sort of a bit of an inconvenience that this has all happened. So I think there's been a massive dampener put on it by what's gone on. But regardless, it will be a fantastic atmosphere, and it's great to have these Northeast derbies back because they are absolutely incredible. But whether it's in the best interests of both Sunderland and Newcastle fans, I'm not really sure. And I say that in terms of Newcastle fans as well, because they've been forced into this bubble trip. Yes, they're going to have a large allocation, but that means they can't make their own way to the ground, which has been the case in previous years and whatnot. And everything's sort of been quite safe. Now they're going to have to go in and out in the bubbles. So logistically getting into Sunderland from Newcastle at the same time with all of those coaches, we estimate probably about 70 or 80 coaches. It only takes sort of one idiot to do something stupid, and then the whole thing is really sort of lit. And I feel for the police having to police that as well, because how do you go about protecting 80 coaches and separating fans and stuff like that? I'm just not sure how it's going to work. And I said on the Raw podcast that this is actually unprecedented. There's never been 8,000 visiting Newcastle fans at Sunderland. So how it's been deemed safe, I don't understand, because how can it be? Because we haven't seen that it is possible. And I would love to be proven wrong. I hope it all goes well on the day, and I hope nothing bad happens, obviously. But I just think that this is set up for not such a good experience, which is a massive shame.
It is, and I know at least out here, I'm excited to watch it, obviously from a very safe distance. But we have an actual pretty good group of Sunderland fans out here in Salt Lake that I've found. We call ourselves the Mountain Mackem, so we'll be watching from a safe distance here. But it is a shame, definitely, because I've been looking forward to this. This will be my first real taste of what the derby is outside of watching the YouTube highlights or the legends of old. And all I know is that please protect our horses. I know Newcastle fans tend to have quite a disdain for horses from the photos I've seen. So nonetheless, I'm sure you'll have your days filled with enough articles and columns regarding this matchup.
No, absolutely.
So, James, it's a pleasure. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you all for tuning in as well. I think probably the next follow up we'll have will be probably post New Year, I would say, to cover Rotherham, Rotherham and Preston North End, followed by, and then just building up to the FA Cup match. So, James, once again, thank you. And thank you all for listening, and we will catch you next time.
That's all, folks.